I was looking at the statistical tables and some of the commentary around them. And so starting that first table and looking at GDP growth, negative 0.2 in June, and you're saying negative 0.2 again, we think, in September. I guess we're waiting for the latest data. And then you're saying, and on page 45, I think you're saying you think it's going to start picking up again in the December quarter. What are you'll be monitoring it all the time. What are you seeing so far in terms of what's happening in the December quarter?
So we so we've got a negative 0.2 for September, which we've had. We're in the December quarter now, pretty much, or getting into the second half of it. And these projections are hot off the press, obviously. So all of the high frequency data that we've had available to us over the last 6 weeks are consistent with that 0.3. And I'll also say, we visited 85 Kiwi businesses in the lead up to this monetary policy statement, and that 0.3 in the December quarter is consistent with what we were hearing on average across that group of businesses. Which is about demand, starting to turn in the economy, a bit more sort of optimism out there in terms of people's spending habits and investment intentions. inflation pretty much in the middle of the target, and interest rates coming down. It makes sense. So we stand by these forecasts. They're literally a few days old, so we've seen nothing. The thing from stats, the kind of upward revision from stats, we'll obviously have to factor those in. Important to say that those increases in GDP over the last 2 years, some of that will be demand effects, some of it will be supply effects. On balance, what does it mean for our output gap, which is our measure of spare capacity in the economy? And we use a whole range of data to come up with that output gap. So we're still reasonably confident that the Stats NZ release and all the high frequency data that we've seen is consistent with the numbers in the back of the NPS.
So thank you. So one of the things that we're still predicting, even though we think the economy is picking up a little, but we're also seeing unemployment continue upwards. And I think also labour force underutilisation, not just unemployment, underutilisation is still, well, it looks high to me. I don't know whether that 11.6 at the end of September is high, or it's slightly down on the last quarter, but if you could just talk us through a little bit that in terms of when we can expect to see people getting jobs again and getting as much work as they want again.
So labour market, we talk about lags between activity in the economy and what's happening in the labour market. So, even though growth has turned, and it's not a dramatic kind of uptick in growth or anything like that, we're sort of, just bending the line a bit, which is moving in the right direction, but it's, it's not a huge boom that we're projecting or anything like that. And it takes a while for that increase in spending to sort of be reflected in firms' hiring intentions. So we do have unemployment ticking up to 5.2%. I think that's in the March, that is in the March quarter of next year, which is around the corner, really. And then we will see conditions in the labour market more generally start to improve as the New Zealand economy sort of heads back to its kind of more neutral sort of growth path. So, as Karen said in her opening remarks, we fully acknowledge that there's more people are going to feel the effects of the slowdown that we've been living through for the last couple of years. Financial hardship will increase for some people out there, unfortunately. But, there's certainly light at the end of the tunnel. We do see those conditions improving as growth gets going.
It's interesting because throughout the monetary policy statement, you talk about the labour market conditions easing and things like that. And I'm never quite sure what that means, because my concern always in the labour market is that people have jobs, whereas you talk about labour market easing and it seems to be lower wage inflation and things like that, which is a bit easier for employers and things like that. So talk me through why you would use that kind of language to describe more people unemployed.
You're starting from a point of saying the labour market conditions were really tight. So there wasn't a lot of excess labour force in the market, and businesses were finding it incredibly difficult to find people. High churn going on across the market as people were moving into different roles, and wage growth and wage costs increasing quite substantially as a consequence of that. So it's an easing off from a tight condition.
So we think about our language in a sort of more retail way or something.
I appreciate you. I just think more people in work is a good thing. But I appreciate that churn is always expensive anyway.
Thank you. We need to move on.
I've got one more question, if I may. It's quite an important one, and I'd like to just go to it. It's a question. It's on page 53, and I was looking at import prices. So it's the table on page 53, and it goes to in 2022. Import prices. The increase in them, as far as the percentage change, was 18.8% from in 2021. It was down negative 2.5%. And it just makes me think, how much of that inflation that we have experienced, that's clearly inflationary, those import prices. So how much of our inflation was actually imported inflation rather than, if you like, domestic inflation?
A great deal was imported. Like that's sort of where the inflation surge started. It started internationally and came over our border through that almost 20% increase in inflation, in imported inflation prices. Which is the kind of thing, what can we do about that as the New Zealand Central Bank? Not a lot. But then it did sort of get embedded in people's expectations for inflation in New Zealand going forward. So price setting behaviour became consistent with a high inflation environment, which is what we've needed to lean against. So that global, COVID was a global shock. So it spilled over our borders big time in the early days.
And I'm assuming we're still just feeling the after effects of that in many ways, with that high inflation then coming down again.
We're seeing the unwind. And so with tradables inflation, at the levels it's at, we're getting through the unwind of that.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
I've got Jamie, Megan.
Okay, so how do we rate Deb's questions?
I liked how fucking aggressive she was. It was great.
Well, she is a tax expert. Like,
yeah, and I mean,
very,
she knows her shit.
yeah. Like, I can see her, if Barbara Edmonds doesn't end up being the next Labour Minister of Finance, it's going to be Deborah Russell.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know much about her, specifically, but I mean, it was good to see a Labour minister focusing on people in jobs. It was.
Labour member, just to be correct, because most ministers don't sit on select committees, but she is a former minister, so yes, that would be correct. And one of her portfolios was statistics.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can kind of see in the way that she's just like, why are you describing it like that? That was great. I love that.
Yeah, the time we get to see our MPs shine.